Spaniards had come in and destroyed these African cities and populations, and then started attacking the non-Africans in the Americas that we call Indians. And this friar came in, and he found some of the Africans who were here that your history book now calls Aztec. Now, you have to understand, they didn't call themselves Aztec no more than Ramses and those other Africans called themselves Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
Those are names that came on afterward. The term Aztec is actually derogatory. These were Moors. These were Islamic-believing brothers. These were Christian-believing brothers and sisters living in Mexico who had come over on those 2,500 ships that had come out of West Africa in 1306 and 1311. We have good records on those ships coming across the Atlantic. The failure was that the black historians didn't follow them to try to find out if there were records on this side that showed what happened to them after they left Senegambia, that Dr. Ivan Van Sertima told us about, and Basil and others. Well, there is a good record here. They started recording their histories when they got here, saying, and we arrived in the ships. We landed south of Texas at a city called Panuco now. We came in to the Valley of Mexico and into the highland areas. We had wars. We made some alliances. We became powerful, and eventually we became the most powerful. These are the Mandinkas and the Fulani of West Africa who had come over. They were trying to find a place to settle. Now, this place had millions of people already here. It had been here since before the Africans had come over from Africa and from Europe, as early as 22,000 and 23,000 years ago, in ships, and had started building African cities all across the Americas. But here we are in 1306, 1311 A.D., and these African now Americans, these African Americans in 1306 and 1311 A.D. are now in Mexico, in a land named for the African Meshi, M-E-C-I, and of course, CO means land of, or region of, or place of. This is Meshi's place, the Africans' place, Mexico. And they come into Meshi's land, who had come in the BC period, and the place is full of people, but they're trying to carve themselves a place out of it, and with wars they do. But they notice that there is this island that no one is habitating. They're not building their cities or their towns on it. And these brothers and sisters know about ancient Memphis. They know about the West African city that was called Memphis. That was the capital of Egypt. 22,000 years before the time of Christ. They know about it, Memphis. They're looking for the ruins of Memphis. And they find it on this island. They knew Memphis was an island city. They knew it. Their own traditions had told of it. They were the people who had come over and populated Memphis. West Africa, not East Africa. West Africa. But then East Africa would come later, and South Africa and everywhere else was coming in. But they found the ruins on this island. Man-made island, one of the wonders of the ancient world that they say cannot be found now. The lake that was called Tashi in some literature and by other names. Nearby, the other ancient wonder of the world, Heliopolis, still stands, showing its pyramids and the famed Labyrinth sitting right there, the place named for ancient Egypt's Tehuti. It's now called Teotihuacan, still carrying that ancient African name with the pyramids there and the The Labyrinth, the famed Labyrinth, still there, found by archaeologists, and they eventually said this city was one of the largest cities. No, they said it was the largest city on the planet up until the 8th century A.D. Largest city on the planet at 7 square miles. But they're not there. They're near. They're in Mexico, where Mexico City is now, built on top of those ancient African ruins. And now they found the ruins of ancient Memphis and rebuilt their city there, calling it after the old biblical name of Enoch. They pronounce it Tenochtitlan, but it's spelled T-E-N-O-C-H, Enoch, to Enoch, Titlan. So they own this old African city that dates to Genesis of the African writings that we call biblical writings. And they're in this city that was Enoch's city and was also Memphis. And they build their city there. And that becomes the capital city that we start hearing is the Aztec capital city. You know, these Africans here. So when Spain comes in, they know exactly where they're going. They know what the history of this is. Their church has those books. They have the writings. You have to understand that once you understand that when the Africans had come into the Americas and built their cities that became known as ancient Egypt, then you're not going to only find Memphis, you're going to find that other capital city called this, sitting on the Yucatan Peninsula. You're going to find the African city called Troy, sitting in Central America. You're going to find the ancient city called Thebes, sitting in South America. That's why they call it Upper Egypt. And in the southland of the two lands called Tamari, North America and South America. So you have Thebes in the south as the capital. You have Memphis in the north. And once you understand that ancient Thebes is hidden under the eventual name of Jerusalem, because those ancient Africans had first built that city in honor of Heru, Ammon's son, not Osiris' son, Ammon's son, Heru. And they called it after Heru. And we flipped that H and J one time to give you from Heru to Jeru in the district of Salim. No, you're in Jerusalem, just the way some of the ancient writings still show that name. So you have Jerusalem, Thebes, sitting in South America. And you have Memphis sitting where Mexico City is sitting now. Now, you have to understand now. Now, when you have your Crusades, you are coming into the Americas. You already know Jerusalem is in South America because you've been here before. Egypt had been here. Europe had been here. Rome had been here. Persia had been here. Babylon had been here. Everybody knew about the Americas. When they came in with the Crusades, they went to capture the ancient African city of Jerusalem in South America. But every time they do it, now they had good success at first crusade because they caught the brothers squabbling like they're still squabbling among each other over the different sects and different beliefs. And when they catch you divided like that, they just whoop all of you. So they came in and they were able to capture this ancient African great city sitting in South America called Jerusalem because they caught the brothers squabbling. Now, when they tried it again after they had been run out of the Americas, they came in again, and now they're trying to do it, and they find out the brothers have a strategy. Now they're working together. When they tried to besiege that fortress city of Jerusalem in South America in that high mountain, now the brothers from Mexico comes up behind them, these armies, and sandwiches them in. And now they get defeated, and they keep trying that. And they keep saying, you know what, we we finally run out of luck on capturing Jerusalem, it wasn't that you're running out of luck. The brothers had started working together, and now there's a strategy. So when in the 1500s they say, you know what, I think what we need to do to be able to take these African cities and lands and all the riches and the drugs and the cocaine and everything else that's in the Americas to start making that money again, to get that land, I think we need to go and whoop the army in Memphis first, in Mexico first, so when we go down and attack Jerusalem this time, we won't get sandwiched in. So in this invasion in the 1500s, here the ships come, and they come into Mexico, and you'll see all the books, and they say the invasion and conquest of Mexico and Peru. But now something should have clicked in your brain right then. When you see Mexico, you don't see Peru right next door. Peru is not in Texas. It's hidden. It's hidden on the far side of South America, on the Pacific side. You can't even reach it coming through the Caribbean, not in your ships. So here you go. How do you know where Peru is and you just found Mexico? They know. They know exactly where Jerusalem was. But they were going to knock out the armies at Mexico and then take their armies down to South America and then conquer Jerusalem. But now they have to hide this now, because if you are the church and you're saying you have a right to come in and conquer and destroy and mutilate and slaughter these people in the Americas and have the church's blessing out of Italy, the Rome there, you better have some kind of good justification if you're trying to say that you're humane. So they come in and they say, well, we're going to introduce them to the religion of Christianity. And so, it's going to give them a benefit. So we can do these things because we eventually, the whole thing is we're going to save them. We're going to save their souls. And they certainly can't tell you that they came in and destroyed Jerusalem. But the Vatican had an interest, because when the church was developing in the Christian world, there were 12 churches. 11 of them are in the Americas, and one alone is there in Italy. But they wanted to be the head, and the 11 churches in the Americas would never allow it and would always vote as a block against it. Now, if you can wipe out the 11, you can become the head. So they had a vested interest in the destruction of the churches and the cities in the Americas. And Spain, of course, wanted the riches and the land. And so you knock out the armies at Mexico, you go down to Peru, and you knock out Jerusalem and wipe that city clean and rob it blind. But now you have to hide the histories so you won't be accused of destroying Jerusalem. And that's what was done. They knew that these were not Aztecs. Aztec means these people were worshiping the ancient religion of Sutek that some also believe is Set, ancient Set. And Set, if you go deeper, you'll find that this Set is also Cain in the ancient biblical writings called Genesis. Cain, that they spell as C-A-I-N, but in the other African records that we now call Egypt, he's called K-H-O-N, Khan-Su, who slays his brother Osiris, who is the biblical Abel. That's why in the biblical writings, these African writings that they keep trying to give to somebody else and say that they're theirs, in these African writings, you find two worships going on, more than that, but two major ones. In South America, Ammon has become the church of power. In Central America, where Heru was given the rule of Lower Egypt, it's Heru and Isis and Osiris, who was Abel, who is then called Baal and El. So you have El in Central America, you have Ammon in South America, and when the Persians and the Babylonians came over and whooped the brothers in Central America, and those African cities fell, and some who survived and escaped that slavery went into South America and joined that group. They brought their books, combined them, and in those writings now we have two names for the ancient deity of Ammon. We have Ammon and Yah and Yahweh and all the other names, and we also see him being called El because they were worshiping Osiris, El, as Baal, as Cain, as Khan in the north. That's not the same spirit. It's two different ancestral spirits that they're worshiping. Now, I know my Christian brothers and sisters probably don't want to hear that part of it, that when they say Amen at the end of the prayers, it's actually the man who founded Egypt really founded it. It was existing some, but he really turned it into empire. Ammon, Amun, Ammon, Ammon. And so at the end of the prayers in the Old Testament, it's Amen. Christ, when this African came, when this brother came, this divine brother came with this knowledge that he had and started saying, look, we've got a problem. I know it's going to get me killed to tell you, but I'm going to tell you that the worship you're worshiping is wrong. You do not have to kill your firstborn male children to please God. God never required it. The man who required it was Ammon when he waged the war against Mexico, against Atlantis, against Mexico. Let me try it again. Against Atlantis, against the Atlanteans at Memphis in Mexico. And he sent Horus's mother, Bast, to lead that charge. And the slaughter happened. And at the end of it, there was an agreement for sending him such bad tribute, such fat and bones instead of the meat, and such poor selection of crops as his tribute for saving you from the flood that had happened at Memphis that had devastated that land in Mexico. Then he says, okay, well, let me see what I can do to get this corrected. And when that war happened and that slaughter happened, they sued for peace. And the agreement was, okay, from now on, to make you remember to send me your best fruit, your first fruit, then this temple is going to be built. You're going to give your firstborn male offspring of stock and human. And so later, with that same worship still going on 21,000, 22,000 years later, then now even before then, 1900 B.C., you have the Exodus, the civil war of the Africans, and they're saying, look, we're taking South America away from the other Africans that were called Egypt, but look, this law here is too hard, giving up our first male born. And says, okay, well, it is kind of hard. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to let you redeem them. We're going to let you buy it back. And so here you go. Now you're able to give money, and if you're a farmer, your farm goods, or if you are a herder, you can bring your cattle and your others and redeem back your obligation of giving your firstborn male child. And so here's this requirement put on you. And when this African, this brother called Christ came and says, look, that's enough of this. You're wrong. The church is not going to tell you you're wrong. But Ammon is not God. God is love. It's a spirit. It's not this man's spirit. And so you cannot worship both God and Ammon. And can't leave that in there. Put an M on the front of it and says you can't worship God and Mammon, riches. No, you got to open your eyes so you can understand what happened. And so here's the history that's unfolding in the Americas. And then when these invasions happen in the 1500s A.D. and these ships come in and they whoop these African cities on the place that had been ancient Memphis, that had been Enoch's African city. All Genesis is African. All Deuteronomy is African. All Old Testament is African. These are African histories. It wasn't that Moses' wife was black. Moses is black. All of them are black, and you're sitting there trying to find who in the Old Testament is black. No, the problem now is who in the Old Testament was not. That's where we are. And some resist it, and that's okay. They'll catch up eventually. But Ammon is at the beginning, and Ammon names the land. He's loving it. It's a beautiful land. He's sitting there with his throne. He's left the Yucatan. He's whooped his father. He's now the king. He puts his throne away from the Yucatan into South America at the top of that mountain, that holy mountain where Jerusalem is eventually built. And he is even higher than that, up into the mountain peak north of that David eventually buys that land when he finds out that's where Ammon had his throne, and said, let's build a temple right here where Ammon was, because we are worshiping Ammon after all. And so they built that temple where Ammon had his throne. So your Ark of the Covenant, which is actually a boat, which is actually an ark, just like the Ark of Noah, it is still an ark when it becomes the Ark of the Covenant. It is a ship. And when you look at ancient Egypt, and you look on the walls, you see them carrying this ship. Has a little house, a little box on it, where Ammon likeness sits on the judgment seat. And the two cherubs, Isis and her sister Nephthys, their wings protect over the covering. There's your Ark of the Covenant that people say they cannot find. It's sitting and staring you right in your eyes. And when David bought that piece of land, he knew exactly what he was buying. He knew exactly where that temple was going to be built, and Solomon built it there. And they thought the temple was built in the city of Jerusalem. No, the African city of Jerusalem, sitting in that mountain, sits upriver from where Ammon's throne had been. That's why when you read in the African literature that we call the biblical narratives, it says that when Solomon built this city for Pharaoh's daughter and for his own palace and for the temple and the little temple for the ark, that they gathered all the leaders together and then took the ark up out of the city of David. Up and out of the city of David, because it was going almost 50 miles downriver to the place where Ammon's throne had been. These are things that we've not been told. I wanted to get what rocks cry out to you, so we could begin the discussions and begin seeing where we went wrong, begin seeing the things that were hidden, throw those covers off. And I'm sorry, the black historians with their egos about Egypt being on the Nile, now they're stuck on the Nile, now they're scared to get on the Atlantic and come across to the Americans and find the rest of the Egypt. I'm sorry, eventually you'll get there. But we're there. And with the youth coming up, I want you to know that it's there. So you can now go forward. You won't get stuck in neutral. You can now go forward and find the rest of the African history and find that you in the Americas 22,000 BC and building cities and having nation building and doing everything in the Americas from then up until now. So when Ammon named that land the beautiful land, the word for beautiful, Mary, M-A-R-E in some spellings, Mary. And the land means Ta, T-A, Ta, the land of, beautiful land, Ta Mary. And Ta Mary is still applied to the land. And just as the ancient Africans said, there is a northland and a southland. Now we have North Mary and South Mary. We simply move the Ta to the end of the word and call it America. South America, North America, you're living in the land that was named by Egypt. Here are your Moors, who are named from Ta Mary, from the M and the R. You get your Moor. So even in the ancient African literature called biblical, You find Amorites, who lived on the north side of the Amazon River and went all the way up through Venezuela, what is now called Colombia, Guyana, all of that. Now we're going to get you a little deeper, something I haven't told before, because that land is also called Syria. Here is your Asia. So when you hear brothers